Welcome to the Alembic. Our topic today is the purpose of yoga. But first, a question. We often hear of someone leading a life a certain way. We might say someone's leading a life of virtue or sin or purpose or adventure or a life of discipline. We also hear someone living the life of virtue or a life of leisure or a life of sacrifice or living a life of abundance. So what's the difference between leading a life a certain way and living your life a certain way? When you lead your life a certain way, you are living intentionally. You make deliberate choices. And when you live your life a certain way, you live in acceptance. It's your lot to live that way, and you let life happen to you. You just experience it. So the question is, are you leading your life or are you living your life? Yoga implies that you lead your life. The fundamental principle of yoga is that you experience your life with intention and you don't just live your life. To understand the purpose of yoga, I would like to relate a story, and it's thousands of years old. And the story is centered around a conflict between brothers. And the entire edifice of the story is built around this foundation of conflict. On the one side, there are 5 exemplary brothers, and on the other side are 100 flawed ones. And there is daily conflict between the two. And the story revolves around how they are constantly fighting with each other to gain supremacy. Like any good story, it's really a metaphor. And in this metaphor, the 5 exemplary brothers represent the strengths that we are given to lead our life. And the 100 flawed ones represent our vulnerabilities, of which there are legion. So let's take the number 100. And the moral of the story basically is that every day, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, and in fact even in sleep when we have dreams, there's always a conflict between our strengths and our vulnerabilities. Sometimes one gains supremacy and sometimes the other. And based on our life's experience, we show some strengths to a higher degree and have some vulnerabilities to a higher degree. And each of us is a mix of various amounts of each of these. Yoga, the purpose of yoga is fundamentally to cultivate our strengths, to continuously strengthen them and improve upon them, and to resolve our vulnerabilities, to work on them so that they don't have the negative effect and create the challenges and problems and issues that they do in our lives. So the entire purpose of yoga is continuous improvement, continuously improving our effectiveness, our productivity, our abilities, our experience of life by reinforcing the strengths, and at the same time continually trying to understand our vulnerabilities and resolve them in a way that they no longer impede our goals in life and hurt or lower the quality of our experience. So let's look at the 5 strengths that we are all given. So the 5 are integrity, competence, intent, grace, and patience. Let's briefly try and understand each of them. Integrity implies congruence. It means humility as well as courage. And I'll best relate it through another story. This comes from the life of Mohandas Gandhi, whom most of us know as Mahatma Gandhi. And here's how the story goes. Later in life, Gandhi used to have daily audiences with people, and they would come to meet him for all kinds of reasons. And in this episode, there is a woman with a young child who comes over, and when it's her turn to talk to Gandhi, she brings over her son and says, Mahatma, my son has a bad habit of eating sugar. He goes, steals into the kitchen, and he gets a handful of raw sugar, just shoves it in his mouth, and he runs away. And he does that all the time. It's a bad habit, and I would like him to stop. So he doesn't listen to me. So can you please talk to him? At this, the Mahatma looked at the child and he said, oh, I see. And then he looked at the mother and smiled, and he says, sister, can you come back in 2 weeks? So she says, yes, okay, fine. And she goes away, and then perplexed, she comes back 2 weeks later, same audience, and she comes over, brings her son, and says, now sir, will you please tell him to stop eating sugar like he does, because it's bad for his health, and I think he'll listen to you. So the Mahatma looks at the child again and says, oh, I see, you like sugar? And the child says, yeah, of course. And then he looks up at the mother and says, sister, can you come back in 2 more weeks? And now the woman is a little surprised, but she says, okay, well. And then again, she comes back after another 2 weeks, and this goes on another time. And then finally, the 4th time she comes over, it's her chance. She comes, talks to Gandhi, and she says, now will you please tell him to stop eating sugar? Now the Mahatma, he has a big smile on his face. He turns to the little boy, he's about 10 years old, and he says, son, you really should not eat sugar like this. It's not good for your health, and if you want to grow up to be a strong man, you should not do that. And that's it. And then he looks at the mother, and she looks at him perplexed. Again, she says, is that it? And he says, yes, that's it. So now she's really perplexed. So she says, if that's all you were going to do, why didn't you do that the last 3 times you had me come over? You could have done it the first time and be done with this. So the Mahatma turns around, looks at her lovingly, and says, dear sister, I have had a habit of eating sugar, stealing into the kitchen, and eating handfuls of it since I was a little boy. And it's taken me 6 weeks to get rid of that age-old habit. That is integrity. It means you have the humility as well as the courage to live a congruent life that people can see. The second strength we all have is competence, or the ability to build it, the ability to learn the skill, the knowledge, the talent, and to develop the attitude that's required to do what we need to do. And the native ability to gain those attributes is competence. The third one is intent, absolute clarity about your goals, knowing for sure what exactly you are shooting for and why. Your motive is clear, your agenda is clear, and your behavior aligns with achieving your goal. That's intent. And I would like to relate another short story here. This one is actually about the same set of brothers, the 105 now, who are sent off to school to learn, and they are living with their teacher, as was the tradition in those days in the jungle. And amongst other things, one day the teacher takes them to teach them archery, and for that he lines them up and he places a small clay bird high up in one of the branches of the trees and asks them one by one to come and aim for it. So he brings in the first one and he says, look at that bird and tell me what you see. Take your aim and tell me what you see. And this young brother says, oh, I see lots of trees. He says, what else? He says, they are all over. He says, okay, fine. Move over. Let the next one come in. And the next one says, I see the trees, I see branches, and so on. Each in turn shares what they are focused on, what they see. And this goes on until it's the turn of this one guy who ends up being the best archer of his time. And when it's his turn, the teacher asks him, look at the bird and tell me what you see. And this young prince, without looking away from his aim with the bow and the arrow, tells his teacher, he says, sir, I see the eye of a bird that I'm shooting for. And the teacher says, what else? And he says, I see nothing else. That is intent. That is knowing your goal and nothing else. The fourth quality or strength is grace. And grace here means your approachability, your graciousness. How well do you relate with people? How well do they relate with you? It's elegance in action. When you are creating a product, is it elegant? Is it simple? Can you explain it in succinct terms? Even when you put together a solution for a problem, someone might say, well, that's an elegant solution. It does the job and it's not very complicated. And that's what grace means here. The last one is patience, the ability to wait for the right things to happen, for things to happen accurately, correctly, properly, so that you get the maximum experience. We talk about deferred gratification. When we are willing to wait for a better outcome later than a not so good one right now. We talk about the time value of money. Patience. If I wait to get my money, it compounds and time is our friend. So patience is simply the quality of allowing time for better things to fall in place. So these are the 5 strengths that we are all born with. And along with those strengths, we come with vulnerabilities, which can turn into failings if not properly resolved, which is why yoga seeks to resolve our vulnerabilities. And the list of vulnerabilities and failings is long. So let's just look at a few of them. I'm sure each of us can make our own list. Fear, ego, anger, attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, resentment, spite, avarice, shame, blind faith, sloth, carelessness, pretense, deceit, inconsiderateness, distraction, cruelty, and these are just a few. The thing to remember is that our strengths are innate, they are inborn, and they are ours to keep. And the vulnerabilities are connate, are all related to the outside. They all come into play when we deal with others, when we have to work with the environment, others in the environment. And therefore, yoga says that our strengths are always ours, and thus we can rely on them, we can use them, we can deploy them to continue to resolve our vulnerabilities, our failings, our weaknesses, our challenges, our areas of development. And that's what it seeks to do day after day. And it's a continual improvement process. So the purpose of yoga and the meaning of living a yogic life is to be prepared for battle every successive day, to continuously reinforce our strengths and resolving our vulnerabilities, our challenges, to keep working on improving our life's experience. As we strive toward perfection, we don't expect or even hope to achieve perfection. Some might, but the goal of yoga is to strive for perfection in our life so we can maximize our experience.